All right, so a lot of millennials and Gen Zers are experiencing a price flip in their monthly expenses. A lot of younger people are now paying more for car payments than their housing. More people are paying more money for their car note than their mortgage, than their rent, and all these different things. So what's happening in the economy? First of all, rents are at its highest, mortgage payments are at its highest, and on top of that, car notes are at its highest. Is it just something that we need to work on? Is it something that they're just not managing their money right? They're not being responsible? Or is it a greater issue with the economy, with what the Fed is doing, how we handled the pandemic? And also on top of that, is it just greed from manufacturers, right? From different car companies, from different investors in real estate and all these different things. But I find this story interesting that some people are easily paying $1,000 per month for their vehicle, and in some situations even more than their housing. And so in today we're going to highlight two different stories of younger people who are actually paying more for their car than for their house. Now make sure you all like this video, subscribe, and comment down below your thoughts on this situation. Do you think it's more the responsibility of the individual not to put themselves in that situation? Is there a little bit of responsibility on the businesses, on the manufacturers just hiking up these car prices and making it almost impossible for them to afford a vehicle? Let me know down below. All right, so this story from Yahoo is just highlighting two different people that are actually paying more money for their cars than for their housing. And on this channel, we talk about the housing market. We talk about how it's in a bind right now, right? Where housing is still expensive. But on top of that, the car market is a pivotal part to the economy and plays a role to the overall health of the economy here in America. So this is something I wanted to highlight too. Between April and June, a record 17.1% of Americans who took out a loan to buy a new car were strapped with a monthly payment of $1,000 or more. This figure was up from 16.8% in the first quarter of this year and 4.3% in 2019. So it was only 4.3% in 2019 pre-pandemic that people were paying $1,000 a month for a car note, which is still a high percentage in my case, but it was only 4.3%. So in Texas and Wyoming, over 25% of car buyers took a payment of $1,000 or more in the second quarter. I wonder why Texas and Wyoming, right? Why is Texas and Wyoming the biggest places where people are paying more for their vehicles? Maybe because Texas, they love everything that's big, and so they just naturally gravitate to bigger cars, and they're more expensive, and they're paying over $1,000 a month. Wyoming, maybe because it deals with, the type of vehicle they need for living in the mountains. They need all-wheel drive. They need bigger trucks. They need these different things, but I find that interesting. So last year, the median monthly rent payment in the US was roughly $1,000, according to the Federal Reserve. For some Americans, their car payment has surpassed housing as their largest monthly expense. So one of them, Nikita, he's a 25-year-old living in Seattle. His monthly car payment is $1,200 a month. It exceeds his $900 of rent for his one-bedroom apartment. Now, a one-bedroom apartment in Seattle, I don't know if that's really realistic. Maybe it's a different part of Seattle, maybe it's outside Seattle, but that's interesting that he can find something that inexpensive in a big city like Seattle, where the high cost of living is pretty high. But, they looked at his verification and things of that nature. So he told insiders in 2021 he purchased a Corolla 1852 four-door LE sedan to use for his daily commute and travel. He said that the car was an upgrade from his previous vehicle, came with a higher payment. Now, paying $1,000 for a Corolla is pretty high. He must have really short terms, maybe 24-month term or a 36-month term, buying something for like $30,000, a car for $30,000, $25,000 over 2 years. Yes, I can understand how it can be $1,000 a month if you do it over 2 years. And so maybe he's actually making a smart decision as opposed to someone purchasing the same vehicle, doing it for 72 months. Yes, their payment is maybe $500, but they pay way more in interest. So this example wasn't the best, but there are people that are clearly paying over $1,000 for their vehicles, right? And they're not paying that much for their living arrangements. So right here, Edmunds, they said the double whammy of relentlessly high vehicle pricing and daunting borrowing costs is presenting significant challenges for shoppers in today's car market because, as you all know, just like mortgage rates are increasing, car loan rates are increasing. New car loans are increasing at a fast rate. The Fed's trying to slow down the market, and so with that, they are increasing the Fed funds rate, which has an impact on other lending services such as car loan services. Right here in 2022, the median U.S. mortgage payment was roughly $1,400, but even some homeowners are spending more on their cars than housing. Cyrus works in digital marketing. In LA, his $1,650 monthly lease payment on his new BMW M4 exceeds his $1,417 mortgage payment for his 900 square foot apartment. That's wild. So he's paying more for his lease car, and like leases, a lot of people already knows that that's not the best investment that you should make with your money, but hey, people are doing it. So earlier this year, he decided to do that. Another interesting thing that I wanted to highlight are these different stats. So right here, it says that 84% of people who buy new cars need or have financing. Now, that percent has always been high. If you look back in 2017, 85% of people who bought new cars required financing or had financing. Another interesting stat, new car payments at eye-popping levels. So share of $1,000 and up payments approaches 16%. That's what we saw. And so you're seeing this increase over here, share of new car monthly payments over $1,000, that this has dramatically increased. Another interesting stat is that the annual changes in average monthly car payments. New vehicles went from $650 in 2022, which was already a high market. 2023, when a lot of people thought the market would slow down, it's already up 11.5%, right? And then you have lease vehicles, 11.2%. Used vehicles is only 2.2%. Why are people gravitating to new vehicles? I think this is where it shows the difference, right? Because cars are getting more expensive than ever, right? But there's a responsibility as a consumer to see that, okay, used car prices are not increasing as much as new car prices. You can find a decent used vehicle, right? And you can see right here that the payments haven't increased as much as they did for new vehicles. You're paying $725 for a new vehicle, where you can spend more than $200 less for a used vehicle. There's some good used vehicles, honestly. And then auto loan delinquency rates. Now, these are increasing, unfortunately, right? You see the peak back in 08, 09 during the recession, and they're starting to increase. They're going back to pre-pandemic levels. And even during a downturn, they may come up here. So maybe we're at this stage right now, or this is going to be increasing because we're just below the 7% delinquency rate. With that will come more repos and different things like that. So that's something to consider. Now, this Lending Tree website is talking about auto loans and just different stats around the market that I think would be great for us to hear. And so we saw this difference with new vehicles, average monthly payment by credit score ranges. So, you see new vehicle 725, used 516, 586 off. Now, if you have a higher credit score, 781 or more, you're paying 693, right? So this is a decent amount of a difference, gets you below that $700 range, but there's not so much difference between the average and high super prime credit borrowers, right? And then you have 661, you have 601, and it seems like this is the highest amount people are paying for new vehicles. If your credit score is between 601 and 660, you're paying the highest amount. The second highest is this one. For some reason, the lower credit scores are actually paying lesser amount per month than a prime borrower. How does this make sense? You all teach me, how does this make sense? I'm trying to understand this. How is someone with a 700 credit score paying way more money than someone, maybe because there's other costs associated, maybe this cost, deep subprime borrowers are extending their payments a little bit more. I'm not entirely sure, but that's interesting to know. The average auto loan amounts by credit score. So the highest amount is right here. It's so interesting that this is the average, right? It's right in the middle. But these people are taking the largest amount of debt for their vehicles, right? And they're paying the most amount of money. It's just like most people are average, but most people are trying to put this facade of looking good. Just stay in your lane. Like even the people who has the best scores are taking the least amount, maybe because they have more cash to put down, right? And then you have the subprime. Maybe they just can't afford afford it. So maybe that's the reason why they are lower, because they are buying lesser priced vehicles, right? Because this correlates directly with this. That's how I know they're paying less than them and whatnot. Okay, Americans owe $1.56 trillion in auto loan. So this number is just keep on going up. Ridiculous. Okay, in these 10 years, the only dip came in the second quarter of 2020, the first full quarter amid the pandemic. That quarter, Americans own 1.34 trillion, down from 1.35 trillion. So not much of a difference. So this is upward trajectory. This is not going to go down. I mean, the car manufacturers will go bankrupt if this goes down. They are dependent on us getting into debt, unfortunately. Auto loan accounts for 9.2% of consumer debt. So that's the third highest. The number one is mortgage, number two, student loans, and number three is auto loans. So right now I fit in the mortgage and student loans category. Americans borrow almost $54 billion a month in auto loans. Looking back 10 years ago, in the first quarter of 2013, Americans took out $33.1 billion a month. Today it's $53 billion. So over $20 billion more per month in a 10-year period of time. So Americans in their 30s and 40s take the largest amount, take the biggest loan. So like millennials, 30-year-olds, which is unfortunate. They need a car. They're getting a new car. I guess we repeat the cycles of our parents, because maybe our parents did the same thing in their 30s. But first of all, cars were cheaper. It was just an easier time. But you learn in your 30s, you make mistakes, and then by the time you're in your 50s, 60s, you're like, yeah, I'm getting this used Toyota. I'll be straight. I'll be good. Americans with the highest credit score takes out the biggest auto loans. Overall, they do take out the biggest auto loans. Borrowers with credit scores of at least 720 took out $87 billion in auto loan debt. The remaining credit tiers account for $74 billion combined. Interesting. And we saw this chart already. Turn to credit unions and captive lenders the most to, take these auto loans. All right, you all, let me know your thoughts on some people actually paying more for their car than for their house. All right, make sure you like, comment down below, and subscribe, and I'll talk to you all later.